Lena Carter lived a life that the world had no reason to remember. She wasn't famous, wealthy, or connected to anything beyond a small-town diner where she worked double shifts just to stay afloat. Her days were built from repetition. Wake up, work, smile, survive, repeat. Yet beneath that exhaustion was a quiet resilience, the kind that doesn't ask for attention but refuses to disappear. The diner where she worked sat beside a lonely highway, surrounded by empty fields and passing headlights that rarely stopped for anything meaningful. It was the kind of place where people came to escape sleep, not to build memories. Lena spent her hours moving between booths, refilling coffee, and listening to conversations that never included her. Still, she carried something inside her that no struggle had managed to break completely, a hidden belief that life could still become something more. That night began like every other night that blurred into memory. The air outside was still, heavy with humidity, and the neon sign above the diner flickered in a tired rhythm. Inside, the usual low hum of dishes, footsteps, and muted conversations filled the space. Nothing suggested that the world was about to split open until the door opened. 3 men walked in, and the atmosphere changed before anyone understood why. They didn't behave like customers. They didn't look at menus. They looked at exits, corners, people. Their presence carried weight, silent, controlled, dangerous in a way that didn't need explanation. Lena noticed it immediately, though she couldn't have named it yet. Her instincts tightened, but she continued working, forcing normality to hold. Then one of the men moved toward the back booth, where another figure sat alone in shadow. The shift was instant. Voices dropped. Chairs scraped. Someone stood too quickly. And then violence unfolded, not loud, not chaotic, but precise. Controlled movements replaced conversation. Fear replaced air. Within seconds, the diner transformed from a place of routine into something unrecognizable. Lena froze behind the counter, unable to step back or forward. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her body refused to obey. She wasn't just witnessing danger. She was trapped inside it. A man was forced down near the kitchen entrance. Another stood above him with calm authority, delivering punishment like it was procedure rather than emotion. There was no hesitation in his actions, no visible anger, only control. That was what made it worse. Lena's breath caught as reality fractured. This wasn't a fight. It wasn't random violence. It was execution disguised as order. And then everything stopped. Across the room, one figure shifted slightly. The man in the darker coat finally stepped into clearer view. His presence didn't raise the tension. It defined it. Every person in the room reacted without realizing they were reacting. Even silence seemed to adjust itself around him. Dante Moretti. Lena didn't know his name yet, but she felt the weight of him instantly. He wasn't looking at the chaos. He was looking at her. Not briefly, not accidentally, directly. That single gaze erased her invisibility. For the first time in her life, Lena Carter was not background noise. She was being evaluated by someone who treated people like consequences. Her fear collided with something else. Awareness. A realization that she wasn't outside this moment. She was inside it, and she had already been noticed. Dante raised his hand slightly, and the entire room obeyed without question. His men paused, waiting for an ending that should have already come. Instead, he kept looking at her. Then he gave an order that didn't match the logic of the world she knew. And everything she believed about survival changed in that instant. Dante Moretti ordered his men to leave her alive, a decision that shocked even his closest allies. Dante Moretti was the kind of man whose silence carried more authority than most leaders' speeches. In the underworld, his name was not spoken for conversation. It was spoken for warning. He did not rise through alliances or luck. He rose through precision, making decisions that others hesitated to even imagine. His empire was not a single structure, but a layered system spread across cities, industries, and hidden financial corridors. On the surface, everything looked legitimate. Investment firms, logistics companies, import businesses. Beneath it all, power moved like blood through veins, controlled by loyalty that was enforced rather than requested. Every man under him understood the same truth. Order existed because Dante removed anything that threatened it, and in that world, witnesses were never allowed to exist. A witness was not a person. It was a risk, a future problem. a crack in the system that could expand into collapse. Dante's rule had always been absolute. If someone saw too much, they did not get the chance to speak about it later. That was the logic he built his empire on, until Lena Carter broke it, without meaning to. She was never supposed to survive that night. The incident that pulled her into his world should have ended like all others. Fast, silent, erased. Instead, something failed in the expected sequence, or something changed. When Dante received the report, there was no panic in his reaction. There never was. He simply read it, processed it, and paused longer than he should have. That pause was enough to disturb the structure around him, because Dante Moretti did not pause for errors. He corrected them. But this time, correction did not come. Instead of elimination, he ordered observation. It was the first fracture in his system of control. Lena Carter became an anomaly inside his hierarchy. His men did not question violence, but they questioned silence. No one understood why a witness was left breathing in closed rooms filled with loyal enforcers. The absence of a kill order became more dangerous than the presence of one. So Dante reclassified her, not as a threat, not as collateral, but as a protected liability. In his world, protection was not safety. It was possession with restriction. It meant she was now part of his system without being informed. Surveillance was deployed immediately. Quiet men followed distance instead of interaction. Cameras tracked movement patterns. Reports replaced direct contact. Lena continued her life unaware that every step was being measured, studied, stored. At first, she felt nothing concrete, just fragments of discomfort. The feeling of being observed when no one was visible. Cars that appeared too often in familiar places. Silence that felt too intentional. Her instinct began to react before her thoughts could explain why. Fear did not arrive all at once. It accumulated slowly, turning into awareness, then into confusion, and finally into curiosity that she did not know how to suppress. Somewhere beyond her sight, Dante studied that shift carefully, because she was not behaving like the others. She was adapting, and adaptation in his world meant potential. Inside his organization, something subtle began to fracture. Loyalty remained intact, but understanding did not. His men sensed deviation in his judgment. A man like Dante did not leave variables alive. Yet he had not only left her alive, he was watching her personally now. That realization spread quietly through his network. And then, without warning, Dante ended the uncertainty. He made a decision that did not belong to his usual logic. His voice cut through the system, calm and final. Bring her to him alive. Lena Carter did not understand the difference between being taken and being placed until the car doors closed behind her. There was no struggle, no chaos, no desperate fight for freedom that movies promised. Only a controlled transition, as if her life had been edited without her permission and inserted into a new scene already in progress. The road outside blurred into silence as the vehicle moved far beyond anything she recognized. When the gates finally appeared, they did not look like prison barriers. They looked like architecture designed to hide intention. Tall iron structures, silent cameras, and a perimeter so clean it felt unnatural. The estate beyond was vast, structured, and disturbingly beautiful. She was not brought to a cage. She was brought to a world that pretended it was not one. Inside, everything shifted again. The mansion was not dark or abandoned like she expected from fear-driven imagination. It was polished, expensive, and controlled down to the smallest detail. Marble floors reflected soft lighting. Expensive art lined the walls. But nothing about it felt warm. It felt monitored. Every step Lena took echoed slightly too clearly, as if the building itself was listening. Guards stood at distances that were not random. Their posture was relaxed, but their eyes were not. They were not treating her like a prisoner. They were treating her like a command that had already been issued by someone they feared more than authority itself. Dante Moretti's order had changed everything. No harm, no intimidation, no deviation. That instruction alone made her more dangerous inside this place than outside of it. Lena began to understand something slowly, painfully. She had not been taken here in panic or impulse. She had been placed with intention. Every corridor she walked through felt designed to delay, not block. Every door she passed felt like it could be opened, but not escaped through. The realization settled in her chest like weight. Escape was not impossible because of locks. It was impossible because of structure. Somewhere deeper in the estate, Dante Moretti observed without ever appearing. Screens displayed her movements in fragmented angles. Guards reported her reactions. He did not ask if she was afraid. He already knew she was. What interested him was something else entirely. She was not breaking, not crying, not collapsing into predictable fear patterns. She was analyzing, even under pressure. Her behavior shifted between caution and observation, as if part of her mind was trying to map the system around her instead of submitting to it. That deviation did not exist in most people who entered his world. Most people adapted downward. She was resisting upward. That difference changed how the system responded to her, without anyone saying a word. Hours passed, though time inside the estate felt distorted. Lena was moved between rooms without explanation, not confined, but guided, always watched, always accounted for. And slowly, something else began forming beneath her fear. Awareness, not safety, not trust, awareness that she was being studied. That realization did not weaken her. It sharpened her. Dante noticed that too, and for reasons he did not yet name, he did not correct it. By the time night settled over the estate, Lena had already stopped reacting like someone who was lost. She was reacting like someone building a map in her mind. That was when she saw it. A door left slightly open in a corridor she was not supposed to reach. And beyond it, something inside the mansion that should not have been there at all. Something that proved she had not been brought here randomly, but for a reason that tied her directly to Dante Moretti's past. You are alive because I allowed it. Now choose what that means. Lena Carter did not see Dante Moretti enter. She only felt the atmosphere change before his presence became visible. The air in the room tightened, not physically, but in a way that made silence feel heavier than sound. When she finally turned, he was already there, standing in a controlled distance that felt intentional, like every step he took had been measured before he arrived. Dante did not look at her like a victim. He did not look at her like a threat either. He looked at her like a variable that refused to behave according to expected outcomes. The room they stood in was minimal compared to the rest of the estate. No excess, no decoration meant to distract. It was a space designed for clarity, not comfort. That alone told Lena this was not an emotional meeting. It was procedural. He spoke first, not with anger, not with softness, with certainty. You saw something that was not meant to be seen. Lena's throat tightened, but she did not respond immediately. Her instincts told her that silence here was not weakness. It was measurement. Every second she did not answer, she was being evaluated. Dante continued as if her silence was already accounted for. What you witness cannot be undone. That makes you a problem for people who solve problems permanently. The words were not a threat. They were a classification. Lena felt the weight of understanding settle in. Whatever she had accidentally seen that night in the city before this, it was not just violence. It was structure, something larger than isolated crime, something that operated with rules she had never been meant to learn. Dante moved slightly, just enough to shift the balance of attention. I could have removed you from existence the moment I confirmed it, he said. But I didn't. That pause mattered more than the sentence itself, because it meant she was already inside a decision she never agreed be part of. Her voice finally came, steady but restrained. So I'm here because you're protecting me? Dante's expression did not change. I am maintaining stability, he corrected. Protection is a consequence. The distinction was not comforting. It was suffocating. He explained nothing directly, yet everything was implied. Outside his control, there were forces that would erase her without hesitation. Inside it, she was monitored, contained, and preserved, but never free. Her existence had become a controlled exception inside a system that did not allow exceptions. Lena felt it then, the conflict forming inside her chest. One side demanded resistance, the instinct to remain herself, untouched by whatever this world was trying to redefine her into. The other side whispered something more dangerous, Survival did not require freedom. It required structure. Dante watched her process it without interruption. He did not pressure her. He did not soften the truth. He simply allowed it to exist between them until it became heavy enough to shape her response. "You will stay within this system," he said calmly, "or you will not stay alive outside it." Lena lifted her chin slightly. "I didn't ask for any of this." For the first time, something subtle shifted in Dante's gaze. Not emotion, not empathy, but interest. Not in her defiance, but in its persistence. "That is irrelevant," he said. Silence followed. Not empty silence, but strategic silence. The kind that pressed against thought until thought began to fracture. Lena did not break it. Neither did he. It became a standoff built entirely out of absence. No movement, no escalation, just pressure measured in stillness. And then, unexpectedly, Dante stepped back. Not retreat. Adjustment. As if the conversation had reached a point where words were no longer needed. "You will decide what you are inside this," he said finally. Not freedom. Not escape. A definition inside confinement. Before Lena could respond, his phone vibrated once. He glanced at it, and for the first time, something in his control fractured, not visibly, but in the pause that followed. A report had arrived. Someone inside his own empire was hunting her. Her existence inside Dante Moretti's world had already started a silent war before she even understood she was part of it. Lena Carter did not see the conflict directly. She felt in fragments. Changes in tone when guards spoke too quickly and stopped when she entered. The way certain names stopped appearing in conversations. The way corridors felt slightly more controlled than before. Something inside the system had shifted around her presence, and not everyone accepted that shift. Inside Dante's empire, order was not just enforced. It was negotiated through fear, loyalty, and unspoken rules. And Lena Carter had broken one of those rules, simply by existing without being erased. That made her a point of instability, not as a person, as a decision. Rival factions within the structure began questioning the logic of her survival. A witness was supposed to disappear. That was the language they understood. Her continued existence created doubt, and doubt inside an empire like this did not stay quiet for long. Dante did not announce warnings. He corrected deviation. The first attempt came without sound. Lena never saw the man who entered the lower corridor that night. She only felt the sudden tightening of movement around his state. The subtle shift of guards repositioning without explanation. Something had been misaligned in the system, and Dante's response was already in motion before fear could fully form inside her. By the time she reached the end of the hallway, it was already over. No alarm, no visible struggle, just absence, a presence removed from the structure as if it had never been allowed to exist in the first place. Later, she would learn it had been an internal strike. Someone testing Dante's decision by attempting to eliminate what he had protected. And failing, Dante never spoke of it in dramatic terms. He did not need to. The message was already clear in the silence that followed. In his world, mistakes were not punished publicly. They were erased privately. That realization began to shift something inside Lena. He was not just powerful. He was absolute within a system. And systems like that did not bend for uncertainty. That understanding should have made her feel safer. Instead, it made her feel smaller inside something far larger than she could map. That night, Dante finally appeared again. Not in anger, not in explanation, just presence. He stood near the window, looking out at the estate as if it were part of a larger structure only he could fully see. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but colder than before. "There was an attempt," he said. Lena's breath tightened. "Why didn't you tell me?" Dante turned slightly. "Because it was already resolved." That was all. No detail. No reassurance. Just outcome. For the first time, Lena understood something uncomfortable. Her survival was not protected by distance or luck. It was being actively maintained by a system she could not control or fully understand. And that meant something even more unsettling. If the system ever stopped maintaining her, she would not survive the gap. Her emotions began to fracture under that realization. Fear mixing with confusion. Confusion mixing with reluctant dependence. She hated the thought forming inside her, but it was already growing. She was safer here than anywhere else. Dante studied her reaction without interrupting it. He did not offer comfort. He did not withdraw either. He simply observed the shift as it happened, as if it confirmed something he already suspected. That was the moment something fragile formed between them. Not trust, not safety, recognition of necessity. And necessity was more dangerous than fear, because fear made people run. Necessity made them stay. Days later, when his state shifted again and Dante received another report, his expression did not change. But this time his silence carried weight. He looked at Lena once, and spoke only one sentence. The enemy is not outside this empire. It is inside it. In Dante Moretti's world, a name was not identity. It was ownership, protection, and control compressed into a single rule. Lena Carter learned this not through explanation, but through change. After Dante confirmed that the threat came from inside his empire, the estate shifted in ways that were subtle but absolute. Nothing looked different at first glance, yet everything functioned differently around her. Doors were no longer simply open or closed. They were permission-based. Guards no longer moved reactively. They moved preemptively. Conversation stopped the moment she approached, not out of fear of her, but out of awareness of what she represented now. She was no longer an outsider inside Dante Moretti's world. She was a protected variable inside his system, and that meant she now carried his name without ever being asked to accept it. Lena did not fully understand what that meant at first, but she felt the effect of it immediately. The fear that had once lived constantly in her chest began to shift. It did not disappear, but it lost its dominance. In its place came something heavier, more complicated, awareness that the danger outside was no longer random. It was filtered through a system that now included her. Dante never explained the structure to her. He never simplified it. He did not treat her like someone who needed comfort. Instead, he treated her like someone who needed adaptation. And slowly, she began adapting. She started noticing patterns. The way staff avoided certain hallways when she entered. The way security presence increased before she arrived, not after. The way her movement was quietly tracked not to restrict her, but to anticipate threats around her. It was not freedom, but it was protection engineered through control. And in Dante's world, that was the only version of safety that existed. Dante himself remained unchanged in appearance and behavior, controlled, detached, observant. He did not reward her adaptation, nor did he acknowledge it, but he studied it. Every shift in her reactions was noted in silence, as if he was measuring whether she would break or evolve under pressure. Lena did neither. She stabilized. The most dangerous shift was internal. Fear no longer dictated every decision. It was still present, but now it shared space with something else, calculation. She began thinking in terms of structure instead of escape, not because she trusted the system, but because she was learning how to survive inside it. That was the beginning of identity distortion. She was no longer thinking like someone who had been taken. She was beginning to think like someone being integrated. One evening, she stood in a corridor she would have avoided before without hesitation. Now she paused there without fear, observing instead of reacting. The state no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a controlled environment where every variable had meaning, and she was one of them. That realization should have terrified her more than anything before. Instead, it grounded her in a way she did not understand yet. Later that night, Dante called her into a private room. He was already there when she entered, standing near the glass wall overlooking the city. He did not turn immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice carried no emotion, only confirmation. "The structure has shifted," he said. Lena stayed silent. Dante turned slightly, his expression unreadable. Then he said the words that ended the illusion of stability. "The war with rival families has officially begun." Her presence inside Dante Moretti's world had already transformed from a secret variable into center of a rising war. Lena Carter did not see the full scale of the conflict, but she felt its pressure in everything around her. Rival Mafia families had stopped testing Dante's influence quietly. Now they were attacking it directly. Financial pipelines collapsed. Trusted routes were compromised. Internal allies were pressured or turned. It was not chaos. It was strategy. And Lena had become the symbol used to justify it. She was no longer just a witness who survived an incident. In the eyes of Dante's enemies, she was proof that his control had a weakness, a fracture point, a leverage target that could destabilize everything he had built. Inside the estate, everything tightened. Security doubled without announcement. Movement routes changed constantly. Conversations ended when she entered a room. Doors that once remained open now required silent authorization. The environment itself was being rewritten around her existence. Lena began to understand something she did not want to accept. She was not being hidden from the war. She was inside its center. Dante Moretti changed with it. The version of him she had first encountered, the controlled observer who measured everything in silence, disappeared. What replaced it was absolute precision. His decisions no longer passed through hesitation. They moved instantly into execution. He did not defend his empire. He dismantled the systems attacking it. Rival operations collapsed one after another. Supply chains were severed. Financial structures were erased from circulation. Entire networks that once operated in secrecy began failing in ways that looked almost invisible from the outside. But inside, it was destruction. Controlled, silent, final. Lena could not see every move, but she felt its consequences in the tightening structure around her. The estate no longer felt like a place of confinement or safety. It felt like the calm center of an expanding storm. Emotionally, she was overwhelmed, but she was no longer breaking. Something inside her had shifted under pressure. Fear still existed, but it no longer dictated her entirely. She had begun recognizing patterns, understanding structure, instead of reacting blindly to it. Survival was no longer instinct alone. It was awareness. And awareness changed how she existed inside this world. Dante noticed it. He always noticed everything. But he did not comment on her change. He adapted around it. His protection was no longer only external. It became responsive, calculated in relation to her reactions, her movement, her silence. That was where something unspoken began forming between them. Not trust born from comfort. Trust built under survival pressure. Lena began to understand the truth she could no longer ignore. Dante was not protecting her because she mattered personally. He was protecting her because she now existed inside his system, and anything inside his system had to be controlled, stabilized, preserved. And yet, something deeper was forming beneath that logic. She was no longer thinking like someone waiting to escape. She was beginning to think like someone deciding where she stood. One night, after another escalation outside the estate, Dante entered the room where she was sitting alone. He did not announce anything. He did not need to. The war was already written into every silence between them. He stopped near her, and for the first time, Lena did not move away. Dante studied her carefully, as if confirming something he had already calculated long before. Then he spoke, voice calm and absolute. "This war will only end," he said, "when one of us disappears forever." He had an empire built on control, fear, and absolute dominance. But in the end, Dante Moretti chose her over all of it. The war did not end with noise. It ended with collapse. Rival Mafia families that once challenged Dante's authority began falling one by one. Not in a single dramatic strike, but through a sequence of calculated failures. Supply chains were cut. Financial structures were dismantled. Trusted alliances fractured under pressure they could no longer resist. Dante did not fight to preserve everything. He chose what to protect. And that choice shifted the entire balance of his empire. Some territories were abandoned. Some operations were erased. Entire networks were sacrificed to ensure that the core structure, what mattered most to him in that moment, remained intact. And at the center of that protected core was Lena Carter. She did not fully understand the scale of what had been lost at first. From inside the estate, everything felt quieter, not safer. The tension that had once defined every movement began to settle into something different. Not peace, not freedom. Stability built through sacrifice. Lena had changed through all of it. Fear no longer defined her days. It had slowly transformed into awareness, then into adaptation, and now into something deeper, acceptance. Not acceptance of captivity, but acceptance of reality. She no longer saw Dante's world as something she had fallen into by accident. She saw it as something she now existed within, a system she had survived long enough to become part of. Dante himself remained unchanged in appearance, but something in him had shifted in ways only those close enough to observe silence could notice. He was still controlled, still strategic, still distant in expression, but his decisions now carried weight that was no longer only about empire. For the first time, Lena understood what it meant when a man like him chose. It was not emotional in the way ordinary people define emotion. It was irreversible. He had chosen her survival over structural stability. And in his world, that was not a small decision. It was a fracture in legacy. The aftermath of the war did not bring celebration. It brought silence that felt heavier than conflict. What remained of Dante's empire was smaller, more focused, more dangerous in its precision, but it was stable, and she was still inside it. One evening, Lena stood near the glass walls of the estate, watching the city below. It no longer felt distant. It felt like something she had been separated from for a reason she could now understand, even if she did not agree with it. Dante entered behind her. He did not announce himself. He never needed to. For a moment, neither of them spoke, not because there was nothing to say, but because words were no longer the structure holding their reality together. Something unspoken had already replaced them. Survival had become shared, not as comfort, as alignment. Lena did not turn away when she sensed him behind her. That small change meant more than any decoration could. Dante observed her in silence, then looked toward the city as well. For the first time, the distance between them was not defined by fear. It was defined by understanding. Whatever she had been before this no longer existed in the same way. And whatever he had been before her had also changed. The future remained uncertain, but it was no longer empty. It was shaped by what they had survived together. That night, as the first light of dawn began to rise over the city, Dante's phone vibrated. He read the message once. Then again, his expression did not change, but the atmosphere around him did. The war was not over, and the message confirmed something far more dangerous. The real enemy was still coming.